Namaste. Welcome to this new session. We just completed the Panchataya Chitta Vruttis. The last one was Smriti. Actually, much needs to be said about this Smriti, particularly for the students of yoga, students of Adhyatma, followers and seekers of Adhyatma and Paramartha. Smriti is of great importance. That is one of the reasons why the Smriti is not just memory, but much more than that. Because if you recall, I said the means of liberation, means of kaivalya, nirvana, moksha is in Smriti. And as a matter of fact, it has a great importance even in Laukika, the mundanity, worldly life, to spiritual life, to spiritual samam bonam. And lot of resources are available for Smriti. And now you will know that by certain examples that the reference is not to memory in this sutra. That is why it's a technical term, and I have been insisting that it must be maintained as Smriti and Smriti only, because Smriti is not just memory, but it is vast and ocean-like concept. Even for our worldly life, the Smriti, the Smaranam, is so important. So, point is to understand this Smriti, particularly the Aklishta Smriti, we must take it as Smaranam, which comes in Adhyatma, which comes in Bhakti. There is Navavidha Bhakti, and one of the 9 types of Bhakti is Smaranam. Smaranam, Kirtanam, etc. Are the Navavidha Bhakti, which we will be seeing when we come to the Ishvara Pranidhana topic, where we will be considering Bhakti. Smaranam is a kind of Bhakti. Vandanam, Smaranam, Dasyam. So, some of you might be acquainted with the Navavidha Bhakti, which comes in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then in all the Adhyatmic Granthas, there is a lot of importance to Smaranam. I recall that part of Sri Vishnu Sahasranamam, Yasya Smaranamatrena. This is in the prologue to Vishnu Sahasranama. Yasya Smaranamatrena Janma Samsara Bandhanat Vimuchyate Namastasmai Vishnave Prabha Vishnave. Yasya Smaranamatrena Janma Samsara Bandhanat. The Janma Samsara Bandhanam, the bondage, is overcome by merely Nama Smaranam, by just Smaranam. Now, this is not memory. When the Nama Smaranam is done, it is not just memory, but that is included here. Now, with the definition of the sutra, you might say that this is not circumscribed. Anubhuta Vishaya. Smriti is always Anubhuta Vishaya. But the fact of the matter is, this Nama Smaranam, Namam, is also Anubhuta Vishaya. If not in this life, in our previous lives. Because this Nama Smaranam has been there from time without beginning. The Paramartha, the means for Parama Purushartha has been there. And we have been in this journey and we have gone through all those various eons, countless eons, and somewhere this has been a anubhuta vishaya. Like in our previous lives, the Nama has certainly come to our rescue. But we do not remember our past lives. But in every life, the God's name is Savior. And that has been experienced. So it is anubhuta vishaya. And this is an age-old kind of advice that has come to us. The Nama Smaranam, the Bhakti, etc. Anyway, the point is that when we remember divinity or we just take the name of divinity, that itself is Smaranam. And it is said that this is a savior. Nama Smaranam is savior. Janma samsara bandhanam. The birth and life and death and mundane gravities, these are our bondages. They bind us. And then we are freed from this bondage. So although we are not all liberated, because then we would not have appeared here, but yet we have been saved from the grips, from the jaws of this karma bandhana. And in every life, or in many of our lives, we have been saved by name of the Lord and divinity. So, there is primarily reference to Smaranam. And you understand the Smaranam is inflection of the word Smriti. Now, this Smaranam, particularly with reference to yoga, yogic practices, where you know that yogic practices are of the nature of dhana, dhyan, samadhi, meditation. So, it is all Smaranam. Meditation is always on something that our wisdom has experienced, our knowledge has experienced, we ourselves have experienced, and then that is a noble aspect, noble content on which we embark upon meditativity and meditation. We do not embark upon meditating on ignoble objects, ignoble thoughts, worldly thoughts, mean thoughts, low thoughts. We always meditate on higher thoughts, always meditate on sublime thoughts, noble thoughts, transcendent thoughts, trans-worldly thoughts, trans-personal thoughts. And we get this memory baggage from satsanga, sadhana sanga, shastra sanga. So understand the resources which are available for this smarana and smarana sadhana. The satsanga, which divulges us realities, ultimate realities, divulges metaphysical realities, Atma, Self, Paramatma, Ishvara, Bhagavan. So all those thoughts are given a lot of encouragement in satsanga, sadhana sanga, shastra sanga. we are able to have enormous uh, samskars and shubha samskars and even the Vruttis. So, in yoga and adhyatma, we need to take a lot of recourse to Smaranam. Even that Upanishadic quotation which says, Atma va are drashtavyaha, shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavyaha. Mantavyam. Mantavyam is a reflective act of the mind. We reflect upon what? Reflect upon something that is known to us, and that knowledge is sublime, that knowledge is worth reflections and reflective processes. That is Mananam. So it is all memory. In the sense, Smaranam. So, name of divinity, when it is uttered, it is called Nama Smaranam. It is not called taking the name of God. In Adhyatma, it is not considered as taking the name of the God, it is called Smaranam of the God. You might say, where have we experienced God? Not having experienced God, how can you say that it is Smaranam about the God? See, the divinity is an omnipresent principle. It is omnipresent in the sense it is everywhere and it is all the time. No time has been bereft of permeation of divinity. Divinity has been permeating this creation completely in all the times, in all the eras, in all retrospective times. You can go to right up to Anadikala. So we have been acquainted with divinity by being in this universe. It is ignorance to say that I am in the universe but I am not surrounded by divinity. Because the whole creation is permeated, subsumed by divinity. The divinity in the form that you consider as God may be that you have not experienced it, but you can't say you have not experienced God. The God is omnipresent, absolutely, essentially omnipresent. And therefore we all have been all the time submerged in divine vibrations, divinity and divine atmosphere. And in our lives, we must have experienced something godly, divine sparks. Maybe not in this life so far, some of you might claim, which is again not true. We don't recognize God. So, with reference to divinity, there is something called as pratyabhjn. We are not recognizing divinity. Divinity comes in all forms. So we have encountered divine sparkle, but it is gone unnoticed. That is why in Adhyatma there is something called as pratyabhjn. About ourselves. About ourselves, we have not recognized it. It is not true that we have not known it, we have not recognized it. We have to start recognizing, and once you start recognizing, then our knowing about the self will become more and more profound. We cannot say we do not know it. At the same time, we can't say that we know it. Yasya matam tasya matam matam yasya na vedasaha. Avijnatam vijanatam vijnatam avijanatam is quotation from Upanishad. If you say you do not know, you perhaps know. If you say you know, you do certainly do not know. So here it is a condition that we all cannot say that we know the self. At the same time, it is not true that we can't say that we do not know the self. We do not know the self in the form that we should be knowing. No one says that I do not know myself. Then why still it is said, know thyself? That means we know ourselves, but we faultily know ourselves, or we scantily know ourselves. Even if you know ourselves properly, it is not sufficient. We insufficiently know ourselves. No one can say that I do not know myself. At the same time, you can't claim that I know myself. Because Upanishads say, if you say I know the self, that means you do not know. But if you say I do not know the self, perhaps you know. So that's a wonderful quotation which comes in Upanishads. So the point is, we need to recognize him. So when we have acquaintance with a person, we know a person, then have acquaintance with a person, then we recognize a person. Now this recognizing the person can become more and more profound the more we stay with the person, the more we move with the person. So we will many times we recognize even life partners after so many decades. Although we have stayed, we are not sufficiently recognized. So to recognize is something like the crescent of the moon. So we need to improve the volume of recognition. Then we can really claim that we have recognized ourselves. And we have not reached that level, therefore we say, I have not recognized myself philosophically. And that's why we are told, know thyself. You should know yourself. Because we do not know sufficiently. Not that we do not know at all. Or we know faultily, but we know. So the problem with us that we know ourselves faultily because of avidya. We are considering ourselves, what is anitya, we are considering that it is me. What is anatma, we are considering that as me. So there is a misapprehension, there is maya, there is illusion, there is delusion, there is viparyaya. Not that we do not know, but we do not know properly. If we know properly, we do not know sufficiently. So, in Atma Jnana, one should recognize oneself. There's a beautiful story which goes as a cub of a lion somewhere lost its way and got into herd of what you call deer, and then it started identifying itself like that. So it lost its memory that it is a cub of a lion. And then at some point in time, the parental lion comes and sees that this cub has got stuck in this herd, and therefore pulls it out and says, recognize yourself, you are not this. He takes it to a well and says, look into the well, the reflection. And there cub sees that it is a lion's face, it is lion. And then it roars. So that's a kind of interesting story which is told in Upanishads. So we have not recognized ourselves as eternal beings, immortal beings, birthless beings, deathless beings. So we have wrongly identified ourselves. So we need to recognize. Now recognition is a part of memory. If you recall in earlier sessions, I told you, smriti and pratyabhjn, memory and recognition. How do you recognize? Without memory, do you recognize? So the point is, Adhyatma, we need to recognize ourselves. We need to recognize divinity. Not that we have not seen divinity. It is not possible that we have not seen divinity. Because divinity is very effulgent principle. You can't say you are not seen. And therefore, symbolically, we are told the sun is Surya Narayana. It is such an effulgent thing. Nobody can say that not being blind, I have not seen the sun. Not being blind, nobody can say that I have not seen the sun. No one can miss sighting that luminous body in the sky. Nobody can miss seeing a sun. Similarly, nobody can miss seeing a divinity. So all these things come in the Gospels of the saints. They tell us about all this. And we all think that I have not seen God, I do not know God. Many of them say, I have not seen, I do not know, I don't believe. But how can you refute a principle which is omnipresent, which is everywhere, which is all the time there? You can't be missing. The thing is that we have not recognized that as divinity. Divinity comes in maybe sparkles, but we have not seen it. And we think we have not seen it. Actually, that's not true. There is all, with regards to divinity, it is all smriti. It is all spruti. Because no one can ever say, I have not experienced God. Although we do not have the God experience or godly experience as it comes in mysticism. But it is not true that one has not seen God. Anyway, that's why Nama Smaranam, it is Smaranam. So that Nama Smaranam goes a long way, and as a matter of fact, for Samadhi, for Dhyana, for Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, it is all based on Smriti. Because object of meditation is always drawn from memory. You do not meditate on something that you do not know at all. You always meditate on something that you know and that you think you know very well and you know sufficiently. Therefore, there can be pensive, reflective, meditative process on it. So it is a very profound thought on which we meditate. There is no meditation on unprofound thought. Meditation always needs profound thought. Now, what is profound thought? Which has been thought over very, very, very often. Which has been encountered very, 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 very often. Which has been experienced very, 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 very often. So the meditations are always on profound thoughts. Profound thoughts means they have been thought over very, 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 very often and very, 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 very deep. Very, very deeply. And that is all memory. So the whole quintessential aspect of yoga is based on memory. It is all Smaranam, it is all Smriti, and then Smriti Parishuddhi, which is the concept which comes in Samapatti topic of Patanjali, which is psychology of Samadhi. Anyway, this Paranam has enormous resources of aklishta Vruttis. All that is metaphysical, all that is sublime, all that is cosmic mystery, divine mystery, or mystery in the realm of the self, Atma. It is the matter for meditation, dhyana. And that it is all smriti. Agama Pramana. What is Agama Pramana? Understand how much Agama Pramana is depending on Smriti and Smaranam. It is all matter for you to remember. Agama is all matter for you to remember. The precepts of Bhagavad Gita, the precepts of Upanishads, the precepts of Vedantic Granthas, the precepts of Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, Jnana, these are all subject matters which must get deep into memory. And they are matters to be remembered. So, Agama Pramana is a great resource for Smriti. Smriti is great resource for Aklishta Vritti, because all those Agamas have what you call enormous resources which are of the nature of Aklishta. Like Bhagavad Gita precepts are Aklishta, Upanishadic precepts are Aklishta, Darshan Shastra precepts are Aklishta, Srimad Bhagavatam Aklishta, Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, all Aklishta. There is no Klishtata. So there will be abundance of Aklishta Vritti in Agamas, Shastras, Gospels of sages and saints, the Vachanamrita of saints and sages. So there is lot of Aklishta Vrittis there, almost of the dimensions of oceans. And it is all matter for Smriti. That is how the Smriti Parishuddhi takes place. By constant ponderance over the essence of satsanga, essence of sadhana sanga, essence of shastra sanga. All these essences are resources of Smriti. So understand the Smriti with reference to yogic process. The Shubha Samskars are Smritis, Shubha Vasanas are Smritis, Punya Vasana, Smriti, Dharma Vasana, Dharma Samskar, they are all Smritis. So we are enormous structure of Smriti, because we have been transmigrating for all these times, in all our incarnations, countless incarnations, absolutely infinite incarnations, in this eternal time. So, understand, look at this dimension of Smriti Vritti, how deep it can take you, how far it can take you. It can take you to endless time. We have been from time without beginning existing, and we have been human beings countless times. We have gone through various incarnations, and we have all those smritis, because we are all structure of karma. So see the enormity of smriti. So this dimension of smriti vritti should be understood. Now, the klishta smriti is something that has to be taken to oblivion. Aklishta smriti must be nurtured, nourished, harvested, and embraced. So that is how our yogic journey will commence. So we have enormous smriti material, the shlokas, the suktas, the prayers, the prarthanas, the prayers. Then Bhagavad Leela Amruta, Deva Rahasya, Devata Rahasya. Each deity has rahasya, and this is all matter for our memory. So there is enormous scope for students of Adhyatma, seekers in Adhyatma, to go after this smriti resources and build up the smriti structure within us. So that is the importance of smriti vritti. Anyway, why did we come to this Vruttis? So you should recall, yoga was defined, atha yoga anushasanam. What is yoga? Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is to restrain the chitta vrittis. If you restrain the chitta vrittis, you can head towards yoga of the nature of sampragnat and asampragnat samadhi. Now for us, what is our yoga? Our yoga is to restrain the klishta vrittis, tormenting vrittis. So we need to do something to restrain that. So in our yoga, we are trying to restrain the shadripus and the klesha vrittis. Kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsaryam. Our yoga is in the form of restraining these, managing these, mitigating these, enfeebling these. So this is how we commence. Although we don't straight away go to chitta vritti nirodha of the caliber of sampragnata yoga or asampragnata yoga. But yoga in some form will come to us, and we are in it. We are trying to restrain at least the tormenting vrittis. Nobody wants to harvest tormenting vrittis, nurture and nourish tormenting vrittis. We want to slowly get rid of those in a gradual manner. So that means we are trying to exercise restraint with regards to those vrittis. So what were the vrittis then? If the chitta vritti nirodha is yoga, then what are the chitta vrittis? And therefore we came to panchatayya vrittis, which are klishta, aklishta, and that's why we had the delineation on panchatayya vrittis, the vrittis fivefold, which are either of the class of klishta or aklishta. Now, how to restrain these vrittis is the moot question. Restraining chitta vrittis is not something like switching off the lights at night and then switching on the lights in the morning when you get up, or provided you get up early in the morning. Because if you get up after the sunrise, well after sunrise, then you don't need to put on the lights. But otherwise, if you get up early in the morning before the sunrise, you put on the lights. So chitta vritti is not just switching off and switching on process. Nowhere yoga suggests that you must switch off your chitta vrittis and that is restraint. There is no such switch given that you can switch it off. And then it automatically gets switched on. And again you have to switch it off. It automatically gets switched on and you have to switch off. No, that's not the process. When do we have turmoil of chitta vrittis, crowd of chitta vrittis, bustle of chitta vrittis? As long as we are in the mundane, materialistic thought, we will have bustle of chitta vrittis. So we'll have to taper our mundanity, our worldliness, our business activity of life. So for us to even have a rest at night, we want to be tapering our worldly activity. You can't be saying that I will remain in worldly activity and I will be taking sleep. That might be just a nap for a short while. Many people do that while they are at work. That's a nap. That's not really sleep. For sleep, you have to taper your business activity of life. So our restraint starts from, as I said, from rarifying mundanity, business activity of life, practicality of life. Now when Patanjali speaks about chitta vritti nirodha, he doesn't at all imply switching off the chitta. What is quite explicit and implicit is that we must collect noble Vruttis. When the noble Vruttis surface in the mind, the turbulent Vruttis are shown a way out, and they slowly go into rarefication. So Chitta Vritti Nirodha means we have to have sublime Vrittis. Sublime Vrittis will restrain the mean Vrittis, turbulent Vrittis, sullified Vrittis, tainted Vrittis, spoiled Vrittis, contaminated Vrittis. So first of all, we'll have to restrain the contaminated Vrittis. The contaminated Vrittis are restrained by giving room to sublime Vrittis. So the mind must be sublime. Quietening the mind is in a way restraining the mind. Ponder over this. What is quietening the mind? That means there is abatement to turbulence of the mind. That itself is Nirodha. So if the Chitta Vrittis are to be restrained, understand here that sublimity must be in profusion. All those good qualities of mind must be on profusion. Simplicity, modesty, temperance, humbleness, humility, simplicity. Unless we embrace these norms, we will not be making a headway into yoga. So that will restrain the turbulent Vrittis, the materialistic Vrittis, the worldly Vrittis, the mean Vrittis, the contaminated Vrittis, the tainted Vrittis, the dented Vrittis. So mind should be quiet. See, imagine if the mind is quietened, what is kept at bay? The turbulence is kept at bay. The turmoil is kept at bay. When the mind is steadied, what is kept at bay? When do you say that the mind is steadied? Is there no restraint? Don't you see restraint when the mind is steadied? Don't you see restraint when the mind is quiet? When the mind is tranquil? Don't you see the restraint when the mind is sublime, when the mind is sublimated, when the mind is ennobled? So the way to go for restraint is to go for quietening the mind, tranquilizing the mind, going for tranquility of the mind, going for neutrality of the mind, going for virginity of the mind, going for purity of the mind, going for piety of the mind, going for sublimity of the mind, going for serenity of the mind. So you can see a lot of yoga in the form of restraint when we embrace these qualitative aspects. Tranquility, neutrality, virginity, sublimity, purity, piety, sanctity, nobility, equanimity, equilibrium. So that is a step towards restraint. Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That's the step that we can be taking. We should be taking. We must be taking. We have to be taking. So our yoga will come in that form. And initial yoga comes in that form. So the more and more the mind becomes nobler and nobler and nobler, sublime and more sublime and more sublime, the mind will be heading towards greater zone of restraint. Enter the greater zone of restraint. And now, therefore, Patanjali embarks upon mentioning the means of restraint. The means of restraint. And then he mentions the means as Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tannirodha. What is abhyasa? What is vairagya? The factors which we are just now mentioned, such as tranquility, neutrality, virginity, sublimity, purity, piety, sanctity, sanity, equity, equanimity, temperance, moderation, simplicity, humility, humbleness, dispassionateness, these are the means of chitta vritti nirodha. So there is not switching off process in chitta vritti nirodha. You don't have to switch off, you can't switch off. There is no switch. You have to take the mind into this zone. And taking the mind into zone which facilitates the nirodha is called the means. Those are the means of yoga. And those two means are classified as abhyasa and vairagya. So don't understand the words in literal sense. All efforts to be steady the mind, be steady the chitta precisely, it will start with be steadying the mind, be calming the mind. So that's how we start. We start on the plane of mind. We quieten the mind. Because chitta is the ocean and mind is something, the peripheral surface aspect of our consciousness. So, for us to make the mind steady, to make the mind quiet, to make the mind serene, to make the mind sublime, to make the mind noble, to make the mind moderate, temperate, simple, humble, so that will steady the mind. In absence of humbleness, your mind is unsteady. In absence of all these qualities and opposite of these qualities, if the mind is engaged in opposite of all these qualities, then the mind has turbulence. Mind is unsteady. Disquiet mind is unsteady mind. Quiet mind is steady mind. There's simple logic there. Ignoble mind is unsteady mind. Noble mind is steady mind. Passionate mind is unsteady mind. Dispassionate mind is steady mind. So all that which works for be calming the mind, be steadying the mind, the tranquility, neutrality, virginity, sublimity, etc., which I have been repeating. So anything that quietens the mind, slows down the mind, withdraws the mind from worldliness, disembarkment of the mind from worldliness, worldly gravities, is called abhyasa. Abhyasa is not practice as it literally means. That's why I've been telling you, don't go by literal meanings. Because abhyasa is rendered as practice. Practice of what? There is practice for everything. Even pickpocketing, there is a practice. Stealing, there is a practice. Burglary, there is a practice. There is practice everywhere. So it's a technical term, which Patanjali defines. What is abhyasa? He doesn't say practice, but people have rendered abhyasa as practice. He has defined abhyasa. And the mind must be thirstless. The mind must be dispassionate. Passionate mind will never be restful. Dispassionate mind will be restful. A thirsty mind will never be restful. Thirstless mind will be restful. So we are now embarking upon the means of yoga, that is means of restraint of chitta vrittis. So let's begin with the upaya, the means of chitta vritti nirodha. The means of chitta vritti nirodha or means of yoga are abhyasa vairagya. Abhyasa vairagya abhyam tan nirodha. Now let's try to open out this, but that is in next session. Namaskar all of you.